What quality makes a great flight instructor? I thought about this for a long time. Well, not a long time, because there's so many qualities that I could think of. By no means am I claiming to be a great flight instructor, or am I claiming to have all these qualities, which I'm not even going to talk about qualities. I'm just going to talk about what I think is the top one, and it's something I also don't claim to have, but it's something I can say that I continuously try and develop because I recognize its importance, and I recognize how vital it is in order for allowing a student to learn, because that's ultimately why we show up to the plane. I don't show up and meet my clients for anything other than them becoming not pilots, but great pilots. I don't develop pilots, I develop great pilots. And there's a lot that goes into doing that. And there's a lot that's required on my end, on my part, as well as the instructor, right? There's a lot that I require of my students. There's a lot that I require of myself. So, what makes a great flight instructor? So here we go. Like we said before, there's many qualities, as you can imagine, that make a great flight instructor. In my opinion, the number one quality that makes a great flight instructor, and I'm confident if you ask yourself, if you're a student pilot and you have an instructor who has this quality, you'll know how helpful it is. Or even better, if you have an instructor who doesn't have this quality, you'll be able to attest to how difficult learning could be at times. What makes a great flight instructor, the word begins with a P, and it is patience. Patience, patience, patience. You know, as instructors, we talk a lot about how the student should have patience when it comes to learning how to land, or getting your license, or soloing the airplane, right? We ask a lot of patience of our students. How often as instructors do we ask patience of ourselves? How often as instructors do we show up to the plane and say, today I'm going to be patient with my students? Just like we expect our student to show up to the plane and ask themselves to be patient with themselves. And so it's very easy as an instructor, especially, here's the other thing, as instructors, if you're an instructor watching this, you can attest to this. As instructors, all these things we're teaching people how to do well, we've seen and done a million times. We could do it in our sleep. We could do it with our eyes closed. And it takes a great instructor to remind themselves and fully know and understand how their student sees that same maneuver, that same task, that same whatever, in a very different way than we do. The lenses our students have on looking at a landing, or looking at a takeoff, or looking at slow flight, or looking at flying an airplane as a whole, the lenses our students wear are very different lenses than the ones we have seeing those same things. And that, as you can see, can create a big problem. Because if the instructor and student show up to a flight and they're both wearing different lenses seeing the same thing, let's say let's talk about steep turns. The instructor sees steep turns in one way and the student sees it in a completely different way. Maybe the student is afraid of steep turns. So that's a big problem, right? If we're seeing the same thing in very different ways, that's a big problem. So I'm not saying that instructors should see a landing, should think of a landing the way student pilots do. You can't. You've done it a million times. You could do it in your sleep. It's second nature to you. So the question is, what could we do as an instructor, or what could you do as a great instructor, in order to get yourself to a point where you could come closer to seeing things from your student's perspective? And there's many things we could do, but the biggest thing that I find helps me, and the biggest thing that I appreciated with my instructors when I was learning how to fly, is patience. If we ask as instructors of patience from ourselves, what happens when we do that and we do it well, the better we do that, and we're able to say, okay, be patient, slow down, ask yourself, how did you see this when you were in their shoes? Don't be hard on your student when they mess something up, or when they see something in a way that's not correct, or whatever that might be. Patience, 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 patience. When you are patient as an instructor, it's amazing what that allows you to do in other realms as well. Because if I'm not patient with my students, I don't have the opportunity to even figure out a way in which I could teach them something in maybe a different way that would work better for them. If I'm not patient, all I am is frustrated. All I am is not only frustrated, they're frustrated too. But if I'm patient and I'm able to understand, when I was in their shoes, when I was in that seat, all I needed from my instructor was really patience. The more I'm able to give that, the more I'm able to ask and get that of myself for the sake of my student and for my sake. It's amazing how more fun this whole thing becomes when we have a lot of patience, right? It's incredible. So the biggest thing that I could tell, my answer to this question of what makes a great flight instructor, in my humble opinion, is patience. The more patient you're able to be with yourself, with your students, with everything, the more it will open everything up and really enable you to do a much better job as an instructor. And finally, the biggest thing that patience allows in a classroom, in an airplane, in any learning environment, patience allows for learning and better learning to take place. You know, I was telling a student of mine the other day, a student of mine did something, I forget what it was, and his reaction to it was, oops, you know, I messed something, whatever. He was saying something. And I told him, I looked at him and I said, you know what? I said, here's something I learned and realized as a teacher since I started teaching. And I never thought of it this way. And I looked at him and I said, great teachers make learning allowed. And here's what I mean by that. You might think, what do you mean learning allowed? That's what we're doing here. But if you think about it, really, what is learning? A huge part of learning is messing up. A huge part of learning is not getting things right the first time. And great teachers understand that messing up and not getting things right the first time is just as part of learning as eventually getting to a place where you do things right. It's an inevitable, it's as much a part of it as anything. And so a great teacher, a great flight instructor makes messing up allowed. Not only allowed, but well cooked, right? We look forward to getting ourselves into pickles. Not negligence, not dangerous, not illegal, but getting ourselves into situations where we see, oops, I won't do that again. Those things stick in your head and are a phenomenal learning experience. So great instructors know that in order to do all that, in order to get to a point where I can create such an environment for my student and for myself, because I'm learning too, right? It's not just my student. If my student does something, I'm human. I'm picking up on that. I'm learning too. I'm walking away from the session with gained knowledge and a deeper understanding of what I will and won't do in the future, right? Many times it's things I haven't thought about before. And so the only way to get to that point is through patience. If you show up as an instructor and you ask patience of yourself, not only from your students, you'll be amazed that just it opens everything up. And the learning experience, and your students ultimately learn that much more and faster. It's higher quality learning. It's amazing. And once they're no longer with you or they're out there in the system as pilots, they don't kick themselves every time they mess up. You know, many of my students, I'm so thankful, I'm in touch with all of my students. They all text me every once in a while, hey, I just got back from a flight. You won't believe what happened. They call me sometimes, they debrief me, they'll share with me something crazy that happened. And you know why they feel comfortable sharing with me crazy stuff? Because they know that, first of all, of course there won't be any judgment, but they also know that every single time, the answer is the same. What did you learn from it? And we talk about it. And so I'm thankful for that. It's unbelievable. And so, again, patience, 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 patience. Patience will make the entire flight training time together with an instructor and student, and even your time as an instructor, that much more pleasant. So patience, in my opinion, is the #1 thing you should shoot for, or more of if you already have some of it as a flight instructor.